I met Vanessa the summer I turned 32, and if I'm being honest, I think my life was already falling apart before she ever touched it. At the time, I lived outside Denver in one of those quiet suburban neighborhoods where every house looked expensive but emotionally dead. Perfect lawns, SUVs and driveways, couples waving at each other while secretly sleeping in separate bedrooms. That kind of place. My wife Emily and I had been married for almost 8 years. No kids, 2 dogs, shared bank account, shared Netflix password, shared silence. People looking at us from the outside probably thought we were stable, successful, normal. We weren't. Emily worked in corporate healthcare administration and practically lived at her office. I owned a small home renovation business with my best friend Tyler, which meant I spent most of my days inside strangers' houses fixing things that had cracked, flooded, rotted, or broken apart. There's something ironic about that now. Back then, I still believed marriages survived dry seasons. I thought distance was temporary. I thought boredom happened to everyone eventually. You keep showing up. You keep trying. That's what adults do. At least that's what I told myself while eating microwave dinners alone at midnight. Emily and I stopped touching each other long before we stopped loving each other. Or maybe the love disappeared first and neither of us wanted to admit it. I honestly don't know anymore. The night everything changed started with rain. Colorado storms hit hard in July. Sudden thunder, sheets of water, flash flooding in the streets. I was driving back from a job site when Tyler called me, sounding stressed. "We got an emergency water damage call," he said. "Pipe burst in a condo downtown. Insurance wants immediate mitigation." I remember gripping the steering wheel tighter and checking the time. "Man, it's already after 7. "I know, but the owner's freaking out, said the entire kitchen ceiling collapsed." I almost told him no. That part matters to me now because I replay it constantly. One decision, one sentence, one different choice, and maybe none of this happens. But I sighed and turned the truck toward downtown Denver. The condo building was one of those modern luxury places with floor-to-ceiling windows and an unnecessarily dramatic lobby. Rich people trying to convince themselves minimalism counts as personality. I took the elevator to the 12th floor carrying equipment while rain hammered against the windows outside. The door to Unit 1208 was already open. That's where I first saw her. Vanessa stood barefoot in the hallway, wearing gray sweatpants and an oversized University of Michigan hoodie. Dark blonde hair tied messily on top of her head. No makeup, phone pressed to her ear. Water dripping from the ceiling behind her while she argued with someone from the building management office. She looked exhausted. Not glamorous exhausted. Real exhausted. Adult exhausted. She turned when she heard me walking up. "Oh my God, finally!" Her voice carried this mix of relief and frustration that immediately felt familiar somehow. "I'm Jake," I said. "We spoke to your insurance company." She hung up without saying goodbye to whoever was on the line. "Please tell me you can save my apartment." I stepped inside and saw the damage immediately. Pipe burst upstairs. Water had soaked through drywall and collapsed half the kitchen ceiling. Hardwood floors warped, cabinets dripping. "It's bad," I admitted. She closed her eyes briefly like she was physically holding herself together. That's been my week. Normally, I kept conversations professional. In and out. Estimate, repairs, done. But there was something about the way she said it, like she hadn't spoken honestly to another human being in a while. Tyler showed up 10 minutes later, and we got to work setting up containment and extraction equipment. Vanessa stayed mostly out of the way, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine while answering emails on her laptop. Around 9:30, Tyler got called away to another issue, leaving me there alone finishing the setup. Vanessa wandered into the kitchen area while I was cutting away damaged drywall. "You want another beer?" she asked. I looked over. "You don't have to do that." "You're saving my home at 10 o'clock at night during a thunderstorm. Least I can do." I should have said no. Instead, I took the beer. That was mistake number 1. We talked while I worked. Nothing inappropriate, just normal conversation. She was 36, worked in commercial real estate law, recently moved into the condo after separating from her husband. I remember pausing. "Recently separated" has become one of those phrases that instantly sets off alarms for me now. At the time, though, it just made her seem human. "What about you?" she asked. "Married?" The word came out automatically, but it felt strange in my mouth. heavy, distant. She nodded slowly. Happily? I laughed before I could stop myself. That answer was enough for both of us. By the time I finished around 11, the rain had stopped outside. The city lights reflected across wet streets 12 floors below us. Vanessa walked me to the door. "Thank you for staying late," she said quietly. "No problem." Then she touched my arm, just lightly, but I felt it everywhere. "You seem lonely, Jake." I still remember the exact way my chest tightened when she said that. Not because she was flirting, because she was right. I drove home with the radio off. Emily was asleep when I got there, bedroom door closed, lamp still on beside her side of the bed. I stood in the hallway staring at her for a long time. There was a period in our marriage where seeing her asleep made me feel peaceful, safe. Like no matter how chaotic life got, this person was home. That feeling was gone, and realizing it terrified me. The next few weeks gave me too many excuses to see Vanessa again. Insurance approvals, moisture checks, reconstruction planning, cabinet replacements. Every time I went to the condo, we talked longer, sometimes about work, sometimes about relationships, sometimes about absolutely nothing. She had this way of looking directly at you when you spoke that made you feel like the only person in the room mattered. I hadn't felt that in years. One afternoon, we sat on her balcony, drinking coffee, while waiting for paint to dry in the kitchen. Denver stretched around us under this bright blue sky, mountains visible in the distance. "You ever realize," she said, "most people stay in unhappy relationships because leaving sounds exhausting?" I looked over at her. "That sounds specific." "It is specific." She smiled sadly. "My husband cheated on me for almost a year before I found out." I froze. She noticed immediately. "Oh God, sorry, that got dark." "No, it's okay." "What?" I leaned back in the chair. "My dad cheated on my mom when I was a kid." Vanessa watched me carefully. "And now you're terrified of becoming him?" That one landed harder. It bothered me how easily she read me, like she could see cracks I spent years hiding from everyone else. I should have created distance then. Instead, I started looking forward to seeing her. That's the dangerous part nobody talks about with emotional affairs. It doesn't begin with sex. It begins with relief. Relief that someone sees you. Relief that conversations feel easy again. Relief that you're interesting to somebody. Emily noticed the change before I admitted it to myself. One night we were eating takeout in silence when she suddenly asked, "Who's Vanessa?" My stomach dropped so hard I almost choked. "What?" "You said her name in your sleep." I stared at her across the kitchen table. Emily didn't look angry. She looked tired. That somehow made it worse. "She's a client." Emily nodded slowly. "Okay." That was it. No yelling, no accusations. Just okay. I remember wishing she'd screamed at me instead. A week later, Vanessa called me around midnight. I almost didn't answer. When I did, I heard her crying. Not soft crying either. Full collapse. "Can you come over?" I should have said no. I knew I should. But I was already grabbing my keys before she finished speaking. When I got there, she was sitting on the floor in the hallway outside her condo, mascara streaked down her face. "What happened?" She laughed bitterly. "My ex is engaged." I sat beside her quietly. "He proposed to the woman he cheated on me with." There are moments in life where you know you're standing at the edge of something irreversible. I knew it then, because instead of comforting her like a friend, I wanted to hold her. And worse than that, I knew she wanted me to. Vanessa leaned against my shoulder and cried while the hallway lights buzzed softly overhead. "You ever feel like you wasted years loving the wrong person?" she whispered. I thought about Emily asleep at home, about our silent dinners, our empty bedroom, the growing distance neither of us knew how to fix. And for the first time in my entire marriage, I didn't immediately feel guilty imagining another woman in my life. That realization scared the hell out of me. I finally stood up after almost an hour. "I should go." Vanessa looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "Yeah," but neither of us moved. There was this unbearable tension tension sitting between us. Heavy, electric, wrong. She stepped closer. I could smell wine on her breath. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. "If you kiss me right now, I won't stop you." My heart started pounding so hard it physically hurt. Every rational thought in my head screamed at me to leave. Go home, save your marriage, don't become your father. But loneliness does strange things to people, especially when someone finally makes you feel wanted again. I kissed her, and the second I did, I knew my life was about to split into two versions: the man I used to be and whoever I became after that moment. Do you want me to generate the next part? The first thing I felt after kissing Vanessa wasn't excitement. It was panic. Real panic. The kind that hits your chest so hard you can barely breathe. I pulled away first, stumbling backward like I touched a live wire. Vanessa looked just as shaken as I felt. Neither of us spoke for a few seconds. The hallway suddenly felt too small, too bright, too real. "I should go," I said again, except this time my voice cracked. Vanessa nodded once. "Okay." But her eyes stayed locked on mine, and that was the problem. There wasn't triumph in them, no manipulation, no game. She looked vulnerable, terrified, human, which somehow made it impossible to pretend this meant nothing. I rode the elevator down, feeling physically sick. The second I got into my truck, I gripped the steering wheel and just sat there staring through the windshield. Midnight traffic moved slowly through downtown Denver, while rainwater reflected red brake lights across the pavement. I kept hearing my dad's voice in my head. "When you cross certain lines, son, there's no one crossing them." I was 14 when he told me that, 2 weeks after my mother found hotel receipts in his jacket pocket. Back then, I hated him for destroying our family. Now I was driving home after kissing another woman, while my wife slept alone in our house. Life has a cruel sense of humor. I barely slept that night. Emily woke up around 6 to get ready for work, and I pretended to stay asleep because I couldn't stand looking at her. I heard drawers opening, the shower running, coffee brewing downstairs. Normal married life, except suddenly I felt like an intruder inside it. When she finally leaned over to kiss my forehead before leaving, I almost broke. "Love you," she whispered automatically. The terrifying part, I said it back automatically too. After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall for almost an hour. I told myself I wouldn't see Vanessa again unless absolutely necessary. I meant it when I said it. That lasted 3 days. She texted me Thursday afternoon. "I'm sorry about the other night." I stared at the message way too long before responding. "You don't need to apologize." 3 dots appeared immediately. "Neither do you." That should have been the end of the conversation. Instead, we texted for almost 4 hours about nothing important. Movies, work stress, childhood memories, terrible first jobs. At one point, I realized I was smiling at my phone like a teenager, and the shame hit me so hard I actually set the phone face down on the kitchen counter. Emily walked in 30 minutes later, carrying grocery bags. "You seem happy," she said. I looked up too quickly. "What?" "You're smiling." The weird thing was she didn't sound jealous. She sounded confused, like she hadn't seen me happy in a long time. That hurt more than if she'd accused me. I helped her unpack groceries while we talked about normal things. Weekend plans, bills, one of the dogs needing a vet appointment. And underneath all of it, I felt this growing split inside myself. Because for the first time in years, I was emotionally awake again. Just not with my wife. That's the part nobody prepares you for. Cheating doesn't always begin because something is missing physically. Sometimes it begins because someone reminds you who you used to be before life flattened you into routine. Vanessa made me feel sharp again, interesting, alive, and I hated myself for needing that from someone else. Over the next month, our texting became constant. Morning messages, late-night conversations, inside jokes, photos of random things during the day. It escalated so naturally that I barely noticed how inappropriate it had become until Tyler called me out on it. We were driving back from a job site when my phone lit up on the dashboard screen. Vanessa, thinking about you. Tyler glanced over casually. Who's Vanessa? I muted the screen too fast. Nobody. He looked at me for a second longer than normal. Jake? What? You're married. Hearing it out loud instantly irritated me. I know I'm married. Tyler kept driving. Then don't do something stupid. The thing about best friends is they recognize your lies before you finish telling them. That conversation stuck with me all day, so that night I did something desperate. I tried reconnecting with Emily. I suggested dinner downtown at this little Italian place we used to love before life got busy. She looked genuinely surprised when I brought it up. Tonight? Yeah. For the first time in months, she smiled at me with actual warmth. I'd like that. And honestly, dinner started great. We laughed more than we had in ages, talked about old memories, shared wine. At one point, Emily reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You feel different lately, she said softly. Guilt flooded through me immediately. Different good or different bad? I don't know yet. That answer stayed with me. After dinner, we walked through downtown holding hands, and for a brief moment, I convinced myself maybe this was fixable. Maybe I could still pull back before things went too far. Then Emily's phone rang. She checked the screen and sighed. I have to take this. She stepped away onto the sidewalk while I waited near a crosswalk watching traffic. A few minutes passed, then 10, then 15. When she came back, her entire energy had changed. A hospital issue, she said distractedly. I need to go in tomorrow morning early. And just like that, the connection disappeared again. By the time we got home, she was already answering work emails on her laptop. I stood in the bedroom doorway watching her type. You ever think we lost ourselves somewhere? I asked quietly. Emily didn't even look up at first. What do you mean? I mean us. Now she looked at me, and I'll never forget the expression on her face, because it wasn't anger, it was exhaustion. Jake, I don't have the energy for another one of these conversations tonight. Another one. That phrase hit hard, because it meant she'd stopped seeing our marriage problems as emergencies. They were just recurring maintenance now, like changing air filters. I slept on the couch that night. Not because we fought, because emotionally it already felt like we lived in separate worlds. Around 1 a.m, my phone buzzed. Vanessa, you awake? I stared at the message, knowing exactly how dangerous it was to respond. Yeah? 3 seconds later. Come over. I knew I shouldn't. I knew exactly where it would lead this time. But loneliness mixed with emotional validation becomes addictive fast, especially when home starts feeling colder than the outside world. 20 minutes later, I was parked outside Vanessa's condo again. She opened the door wearing black leggings and an oversized white t-shirt, hair still damp from a shower. No makeup, barefoot again. There was something intimate about how comfortable she looked around me now. Neither of us mentioned the kiss immediately. She poured wine while music played softly through the apartment, some old Fleetwood Mac song low in the background. You almost didn't come, she said. I almost didn't. Vanessa studied me for a moment. Then why did you? I could have lied. Instead, I told the truth, because I wanted to. The air changed after that. She stepped closer, slowly. You know this ends badly, right? Probably. And you're still here. I nodded once. That's when she kissed me again. This time I didn't pull away. Everything after that happened both slowly and all at once. Her hands in my shirt. My heartbeat hammering so hard it blurred my thoughts. The overwhelming awareness that I was crossing a line I could never uncross. When we ended up in her bedroom, I actually stopped for a second. Not because I didn't want her, because suddenly I saw Emily's face in my mind. Our wedding day, her crying during vows, the first apartment we rented together, Sunday mornings making pancakes, 8 years of shared life flashing through my head in seconds. Vanessa touched my face gently. We don't have to do this. But that almost made it worse, because she gave me an out, and I ignored it. I slept with her anyway. The worst part? It felt incredible. Not just physically, emotionally. That's the truth people hate admitting about affairs. Sometimes they don't feel toxic in the beginning. Sometimes they feel like oxygen after drowning for years. Vanessa held me afterward while city lights glowed through the bedroom windows. "You're thinking about your wife," she whispered. I swallowed hard. Yes. Do you love her? That question should have had an immediate answer. Instead, silence stretched too long. Vanessa noticed. "That's complicated." "No," she said quietly. "It's actually very simple. People just make it complicated because they're scared." I left around 4 in the morning feeling hollowed out. As soon as I got home, I showered like I could wash guilt off my skin. Emily was asleep upstairs. I stood beside the bed watching her breathe, and suddenly realized something horrifying. I had become two different men. The husband pretending everything was normal, and the man sneaking into another woman's bed at night. That split started destroying me almost immediately. Over the next few weeks, I became paranoid about everything, deleting texts, muting notifications, making excuses about late job sites. At first, Emily didn't seem suspicious. Then little things started changing. She began watching me more carefully, asking where I'd been, checking the clock when I came home late. One night, she casually reached for my phone while hers was charging, and my entire body tensed so visibly she noticed instantly. Her hand stopped. "Why are you acting weird?" "I'm not." "You just flinched." I didn't flinch, but I had, badly. Emily stared at me for several long seconds. Then she quietly handed the phone back. That scared me more than a fight would have, because emotionally intelligent people don't need proof right away. They feel shifts, and something inside her was beginning to feel me slipping away. Meanwhile, Vanessa and I were getting deeper emotionally than either of us intended. We weren't just sleeping together. We were building intimacy. That's what made it dangerous. We talked about childhood trauma, marriage regrets, fear, loneliness, future dreams we stopped admitting out loud. At some point, I realized Vanessa knew more about my emotional life than my wife did. And once that happens, the affair stops being temporary fantasy. It starts becoming real. Then came the night everything got worse. Vanessa invited me to a rooftop birthday party for one of her friends downtown. I initially refused because it was too risky. "You know people there," I told her. "So?" "So somebody could see us." She rolled her eyes. "You're acting like we're celebrities." Still, I almost backed out completely, until she sent one message that wrecked my resolve. "I miss you when you're not around." Nobody had said something that simple to me in years. So I went. And that decision changed everything. Because halfway through the night, standing near the rooftop bar with Vanessa laughing beside me, I heard a familiar voice behind me say, "Jake?" My blood turned to ice. I turned around slowly and saw Emily's younger sister staring directly at us. The second I saw Claire standing there, I knew my life was about to detonate. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, actually detonate. She was holding a vodka soda in one hand, frozen halfway through turning toward the bar. Her eyes moved from me to Vanessa and back again with horrifying speed. Claire wasn't stupid. She was Emily's younger sister by 4 years, but honestly, she'd always been sharper than both of us. The kind of woman who noticed tension in a room before anyone spoke. She worked in marketing, lived downtown, had this brutally observant personality that made people either love her or avoid her. At that moment, I wanted to disappear. "Claire," I said carefully. Vanessa glanced between us immediately. "You know each other?" Nobody answered right away. Claire's expression shifted from confusion to realization so fast it physically hurt to watch. "Oh my God." I stepped closer instinctively. "It's not what it looks like." The second the sentence left my mouth, I hated myself for sounding exactly like every guilty liar in history. Claire actually laughed, not because she thought it was funny, because she was stunned. "You're kidding me, right?" Vanessa looked at me sharply now. "What's going on?" I swallowed hard. This is my sister-in-law. The color drained from Vanessa's face instantly. The silence that followed felt unreal. Music still played around us. People laughed nearby. Glasses clinked. Denver's skyline stretched glowing behind everyone, while my entire marriage stood on the edge of collapse 15 floors above the city. Claire stared at Vanessa. "You're the woman he's cheating with?" Vanessa took a step backward like she'd been slapped. "Wait, he said things were bad between you guys, but he never said—" "Because he's married," Claire snapped. "I know he's married." "You know my sister?" Vanessa looked blindsided now. "No." Claire turned back toward me with pure disbelief in her eyes. "You brought your mistress to a public party downtown?" "She's not my mistress." The second I said it, both women looked at me like I was insane. Because what else was she? Claire lowered her voice, which somehow felt more dangerous than yelling. "Does Emily know?" "No." "Jesus Christ, Jake." Vanessa crossed her arms tightly. "You told me you were basically separated emotionally." I looked at her. "We are." Claire scoffed loudly. "Oh, that's original." People nearby had started noticing tension now, not details, just the unmistakable emotional gravity of something bad happening. I reached for Claire's arm. "Can we talk somewhere private?" She jerked away immediately. "Don't touch me." That one hurt more than I expected, because Claire used to adore me. Before all this, I was the guy who helped her move apartments, the guy who picked her up drunk from bars in college without judging her, the guy she called when her ex-boyfriend smashed her windshield 3 years earlier. I'd been family. Now she looked at me like a stranger. Vanessa spoke quietly. "I should leave." Claire turned toward her again. "You absolutely should." "Claire," I warned. "No. Actually, don't clear me right now. My sister has spent years defending you to everyone. Years." Vanessa looked confused. "What does that mean?" Claire laughed bitterly. "It means Emily thinks her husband is emotionally distant because he's depressed and burned out from work, not because he's screwing another woman behind her back." That sentence hit Vanessa hard. I saw it happen in real time. Because despite everything, I don't think Vanessa had fully emotionally connected Emily to reality until then. My wife had existed more like an abstract complication than a living person. Now, suddenly she was real. A woman with a name, a sister, a family. Vanessa grabbed her purse. "I'm leaving." I turned toward her immediately. "Vanessa? Don't." The coldness in her voice stopped me instantly. Then she looked directly at me, hurt flashing across her face. "You should have told me who she was." Before I could answer, she walked away through the crowd and disappeared toward the elevators. Claire watched her go before turning back to me. "You're unbelievable." "I didn't plan this." "Oh, that makes it better." "Claire, please." She stared at me for several seconds, and suddenly her anger shifted into something sadder. "You know what the worst part is?" I couldn't answer. "You actually look happy." That sentence knocked the air out of me, because she was right. Despite the guilt, despite the lies, despite the disaster unfolding around me, I had looked happier lately, and everyone noticed. Claire shook her head slowly. "I don't even recognize you." Then she walked away too. I stayed on that rooftop another 20 minutes, trying to figure out how my life had spiraled so badly so fast. The city lights blurred beneath me, while panic spread through my body in waves. Should I call Emily first? Should I go home immediately? Should I warn Vanessa? Every option felt catastrophic. I texted Claire 3 times before she finally responded. "Please don't tell her yet." Her reply came almost immediately. "You should have thought about that before tonight." I drove home shaking. Not dramatic shaking, adrenaline shaking. I kept imagining Emily finding out, imagining her face, imagining the exact moment 8 years of marriage collapsed in front of her. When I got home, the house was dark, except for the kitchen light. Emily sat at the counter wearing sweatpants and one of my old hoodies, scrolling through her phone. The second she looked up at me, I knew. Claire had already called her. There's this strange stillness people get when they're emotionally wounded beyond immediate reaction. Emily looked calm in a way that terrified me. "You're home late," she said quietly. My chest tightened. "Yeah." She set her phone down slowly. "Were you with her?" No yelling, no crying. Just the question. And somehow that was infinitely worse. I stood frozen near the doorway. Emily looked exhausted. Not angry, destroyed. How long? She asked. I couldn't speak. How long, Jake? A couple months. She nodded once, like she'd already guessed that answer. Did you sleep with her? The silence gave me away before I spoke. Emily closed her eyes. I'll never forget that moment, because I physically watched my wife's heart break. Not dramatically, quietly, like something collapsing inward. When? Emily, when? A few weeks ago. She pressed both palms against the counter and stared downward. I kept asking myself why you felt so far away lately. Every word came out hollow. I thought maybe you were depressed. I thought maybe work stress was getting to you. I thought maybe I wasn't trying hard enough. The guilt became unbearable. I'm sorry. She laughed softly. That's what you say after forgetting milk at the grocery store. I stepped closer. Emily, please. No, she stood up immediately. No, don't do that thing where you suddenly become emotional now that you got caught. That's not what this is. Then what is it? I didn't have an answer, because the truth was too ugly. The truth was, I loved my wife in one way and Vanessa in another. And somewhere along the line, I stopped understanding myself enough to separate those feelings clearly. Emily stared at me with tears finally forming in her eyes. Did you ever plan on telling me? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. That answer was enough. She looked away immediately. Oh my God. I tried moving toward her again, but she backed up instantly like my presence physically disgusted her now. Don't touch me. Hearing those words from her shattered something inside me. We'd spent almost a decade building a life together. Now she couldn't even stand near me. Was she worth it? Emily asked quietly. The question destroyed me, because there was no correct answer. If I said no, then all this pain became meaningless cruelty. If I said yes, I became a monster. My silence answered for me. Emily started crying then. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears sliding down her face while she stared at the man she thought she knew. I defended you to everyone, she whispered. I felt physically sick. My parents said you seemed distant lately, and I told them marriage gets hard sometimes. Claire asked if we were okay, and I told her you were just stressed. Every sentence felt like another knife. I loved you so much, Jake. Loved. Past tense. I tried speaking again. I still love you. Emily looked at me with genuine disbelief. No, you don't. That's not true. You don't betray people like this if you love them. That sentence stayed in my head for months afterward because part of me still argued with it. I did love her. That was the problem. I just wasn't enough anymore for the kind of love marriage actually requires. Emily wiped her face angrily. Do her husband and family know about you? She separated. That's not what I asked. I looked away. Emily laughed bitterly again. Unbelievable. Then she said the sentence I'd been dreading since this started. I want you out. My throat tightened immediately. Tonight? Yes, tonight. Emily, can we please just talk tomorrow when things calm down? No. She pointed toward the stairs. You lost the right to ask for patience when you started sleeping with someone else. I stood there, feeling like the entire world had tilted sideways. This is still my home. Emily's eyes hardened instantly. No, it was our home. That distinction hurt more than screaming would have. I packed a bag in silence while she stayed downstairs. Every room upstairs felt haunted suddenly. Wedding photos, shared furniture, the life we built together sitting around me while I shoved clothes into a duffel bag like a criminal fleeing a scene. At one point, I sat on the edge of the bed, unable to move. The reality finally hit me fully. My marriage was ending. Not theoretically, actually ending. And despite everything, part of me still couldn't emotionally process how I'd let this happen. When I came downstairs, Emily was sitting exactly where I left her. She didn't look up. Where are you going? I don't know. That seems fitting. I grabbed my keys slowly. Emily. Now she looked at me, and I swear the sadness in her eyes hurt worse than hatred ever could have. You know the worst part? I couldn't answer. You made me feel stupid for loving you. Then she looked away again. Conversation over. I drove aimlessly for almost an hour before ending up outside Vanessa's condo. I sat in the truck debating whether I should even go upstairs. Then my phone buzzed. It was Vanessa. Claire called me after you left. I stared at the screen. Another message came immediately. You should have told me everything. Then another. But I still want you here. That should have comforted me. Instead, it terrified me. Because suddenly this wasn't fantasy anymore. They were consequences now, real ones. I walked upstairs anyway. Vanessa opened the door looking emotionally wrecked. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. How bad is it? She asked quietly. I looked at her for a long moment before answering. My wife kicked me out. The second the words left my mouth, the entire affair changed. No more pretending, no more compartmentalizing. Now there was only damage, and neither of us knew what came next. Vanessa stared at me for several seconds after I told her Emily kicked me out. Not shocked, not relieved, just overwhelmed. The reality of what we'd done finally sat fully between us now, stripped of secrecy and adrenaline. Affairs survive on fantasy for a long time. Hidden apartments, late-night texts, stolen moments. But once real life crashes through the door, things change fast. She stepped aside quietly. Come in. I carried my duffel bag into the condo, feeling like I was walking into the aftermath of a car accident I caused myself. Neither of us spoke much that night. Vanessa poured whiskey instead of wine. We sat on the couch with the television muted, while downtown Denver glowed outside the windows. Finally, she looked at me. Do you regret it? I should have answered immediately. Instead, I stared into my glass too long. That's complicated. Vanessa nodded slowly. That's what I thought. I looked over at her. What about you? She gave this sad half smile. I regret the pain. I don't regret you. That answer stayed with me because it was exactly how I felt too. And maybe that's what made everything so ugly. This wasn't some meaningless hookup. Vanessa and I genuinely connected in ways I hadn't experienced in years. But emotional truth doesn't erase betrayal. Loving someone new doesn't magically make the destruction acceptable. Over the next few weeks, my life became unrecognizable. Emily stopped answering my calls almost immediately. The only communication came through short texts about logistics. You still have mail here. Your mother called. The dogs have vet appointments Thursday. Cold, efficient, final. Claire blocked my number completely. Tyler barely spoke to me outside work. Even my own parents looked disappointed when I finally told them the truth. My mother cried quietly at the kitchen table, while my father sat there in grim silence, like he was watching history repeat itself. You know what hurts most? My dad finally said. I looked up. You understood exactly what cheating does to a family, because you lived through it, and you still did it anyway. There wasn't a defense for that. Meanwhile, living with Vanessa started exposing realities we never had to face during the affair. That's another thing nobody tells you. Fantasy relationships exist in controlled environments. You only see each other emotionally charged, emotionally available, emotionally intentional. But daily life is different. Bills, stress, habits. Bad moods, silence. Real relationships breathe differently. At first, though, we tried hard to make it work, almost desperately. We cooked together, watched movies curled up on the couch, took weekend trips into the mountains, slept tangled together like two people terrified of losing the only thing that currently made sense. And honestly, there were moments I felt genuinely happy. That truth matters, because people always want betrayal stories to end with immediate punishment, instant regret, instant karma. Life usually isn't that clean. Sometimes the wrong thing still feels emotionally real. Sometimes love grows in terrible places. The problem was, guilt kept leaking into everything. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning thinking about Emily sleeping alone in our house. I'd see a woman at the grocery store wearing scrubs like my wife and feel physically sick. Every time my phone buzzed, part of me hoped it was Emily deciding to fight for us, and another part feared it. Vanessa noticed all of it. One night, about 2 months after I moved in, she finally snapped. We were eating takeout on the balcony when she suddenly set her fork down. You were still emotionally married to her. I looked up immediately. That's not true. It absolutely is. Vanessa, no. Listen to yourself whenever you talk about Emily. There's guilt, grief, history, responsibility. You still orbit her emotionally, even when you're here with me. I rubbed my face tiredly. It's complicated.
There's that word again. Her frustration had been building for weeks. I didn't steal you, Jake. You walked into this willingly, but sometimes it feels like I'm sharing a relationship with your marriage ghost. That sentence landed hard because it was accurate. I still carried Emily everywhere mentally, not because I wanted to reconcile necessarily, because 8 years doesn't disappear overnight. Vanessa stood up and walked inside. I need space tonight. That became more common afterward. Arguments about trust, arguments about guilt, arguments about whether our relationship had enough real foundation to survive outside the affair itself. Then came Thanksgiving. Emily invited me to meet at a coffee shop to finalize paperwork for selling the house. It was the first time I'd seen her in almost 3 months. I barely recognized her at first. Not physically, emotionally. She looked calmer somehow. Sadder too, but clearer, like someone recovering after surviving a storm. We sat across from each other in awkward silence while people worked on laptops around us. You look tired, she said eventually. I laughed softly. Yeah. That familiar silence settled between us again, except now it felt less angry and more mournful. Emily slid paperwork across the table. Realtor says the market's still good. I nodded automatically. We discussed numbers like strangers dissolving a business partnership instead of a marriage. Then suddenly, Emily looked at me directly.
Was any of it real? The question caught me off guard. What? Our marriage? I stared at her. Of course it was. Then how did we end up here? I didn't have a good answer, because the honest truth was there wasn't one single moment everything broke. Marriages usually erode slowly, tiny distances becoming larger ones, until eventually 2 people wake up emotionally stranded from each other. But cheating changes the narrative. It turns years of complexity into one brutal betrayal point. Emily wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. I keep replaying everything, wondering when I lost you. You didn't lose me. She looked up sharply. You chose someone else. That's literally losing you. I swallowed hard. I never wanted to hurt you. That made her laugh quietly. Do you know how many cheaters say that exact sentence? I looked away. She softened slightly then, and somehow that hurt even worse. I don't think you're evil, Jake. Feels like I am sometimes. No, I think you got lonely and selfish and emotionally weak at the same time. That honesty hit harder than screaming ever could have. Before we left, Emily hesitated. Then she asked the question I dreaded most. Do you love her? I thought about Vanessa waiting at the condo. The way she touched my face when I spiraled. The night she held me through panic attacks after the separation. The complicated, messy, undeniable feelings between us. Yes. Emily closed her eyes briefly. Then she nodded once. Okay.
No breakdown, no dramatic exit, just quiet acceptance. And somehow that devastated me more than rage. A month later, the divorce papers were finalized. 8 years officially reduced to signatures. I expected to feel certainty afterward. Instead, I felt hollow. Vanessa and I tried moving forward anyway. For a while, it almost worked. We traveled more, laughed more, talked about starting fresh somewhere new eventually. But cracks kept growing underneath us.
because relationships born through betrayal carry a specific kind of poison. Trust becomes complicated. If someone cheated with you, part of you always wonders whether they'll cheat on you too. One night, Vanessa asked casually, "Do you ever miss being married?" I answered too honestly, "Sometimes." She went quiet immediately. Another night, she caught me staring at an old photo of Emily and me while organizing files on my laptop. That fight lasted hours. "You still love her." I never said I stopped. Vanessa looked shattered. Then what am I doing here? I didn't know anymore. That was the terrifying part. Somewhere along the line, the emotional intensity that pulled us together started mutating into something heavier, less romantic, more fragile. Then came the final breaking point. About a year after the affair started, I got a call from Claire. The first time she'd spoken to me since everything exploded. Her voice sounded tense. "Emily's in the hospital." My entire body went cold. What happened?
Car accident. I was already grabbing keys before she finished talking. Vanessa watched me rush around the apartment. "What's wrong?" "Emily got hurt." The second I said her name, everything shifted. Not jealousy, recognition. Vanessa saw immediately where my instincts went when crisis hit. Straight back to my wife. Ex-wife now, technically, but emotionally, the distinction suddenly felt meaningless. "You're leaving," Vanessa said quietly. "I need to make sure she's okay." She nodded slowly. "Of course you do." The drive to the hospital felt endless. When I got there, Claire met me in the hallway, looking emotionally exhausted. "She's okay," she said quickly. "Broken arm, concussion, some stitches." Relief hit me so hard my knees almost gave out. Claire watched my reaction carefully. "You still love her?" It wasn't a question. I rubbed both hands over my face. "I don't know what's wrong with me." "Yes, you do." I looked up. "You wanted 2 lives." That sentence cut straight through me, because it was true. I wanted stability and excitement, history and novelty, comfort and emotional intensity. And in trying to keep both, I destroyed everything. Emily looked pale when I finally entered her hospital room, but she smiled softly when she saw me. That almost broke me completely. "Hey," she whispered. "Hey." I sat beside her bed, feeling years of history flooding back all at once. For a while, we just talked quietly. Normal things. Her injuries, the accident, recovery. Then eventually she looked at me carefully. "She's still with you?" I nodded. Emily stared at the ceiling for a long moment. "Do you love her more than you loved me?" The question shattered whatever emotional defenses I still had left, because the truthful answer was impossibly complicated. Different kinds of love, different versions of myself, different seasons of life. "I don't know," I admitted. Emily smiled sadly. "That's the problem, Jake." Tears finally hit me then, real ones. "I'm sorry." And this time I meant something deeper than guilt over getting caught. I meant sorry for all of it. The loneliness we ignored, the distance, the betrayal, the destruction. Emily reached over carefully with her uninjured hand and squeezed mine weakly. "I know." A week later, Vanessa ended things. Not explosively, quietly, like adults finally admitting reality. We sat in the condo living room where everything started unraveling between us. "You ran to her," Vanessa said softly. "She was hurt." "I know. And I would have done the same thing once upon a time for someone I loved." I looked at her helplessly. "I do love you. I know you do." Tears filled her eyes. "But not cleanly." That sentence ended us. And honestly, she was right. Nothing about us had ever been clean. When I moved out, neither of us fought anymore. We were just tired. 2 damaged people who found each other at the wrong time in the wrong way, and mistook emotional survival for destiny. It's been almost 3 years now. Emily remarried last spring to a guy named Daniel, who apparently treats her incredibly well. Claire still barely speaks to me, though she's civil now.
Tyler and I repaired our friendship eventually, but not fully. And Vanessa? I haven't seen her in almost 18 months. Sometimes I still think about her when it rains in Denver. Sometimes I think about how one burst pipe destroyed 4 lives. But that's not really true, is it? The pipe didn't ruin us. The loneliness did. The avoidance did. The selfishness did. People love pretending betrayal comes from monsters because it makes the world feel safer. But most betrayals come from ordinary people making selfish, emotional decisions 1 inch at a time, until suddenly they've crossed lines they once swore they never would. That's the scariest part of all. I used to think cheating was one terrible choice. Now I know it's actually hundreds of small ones, made long before the first kiss ever happens. And by the time you realize what you've become, someone you once loved is usually standing in the wreckage, asking how everything fell apart.